Okay. So look, spiritual triad. The plan comes first, you come second. I mean, spiritual triad, there is a divine plan. You do have a soul, it's nice to express, but sorry, something else is up. Right, okay, if you want to express your soul, you can't help but the reappearance of Christ. Well, I read that one, I said, wait a second. That doesn't sound good for a beginning student of esotericism. I remember almost when I read it. It was back in Fargo, North Dakota when I was directing operas. And I just said, well, people who want to express their soul, they won't be participating in the reappearance of the Christ because the demands are so heavy on a planetary basis. Spiritual triad, what is God thinking? What is God loving? What is God willing? And then all the rest is individual, personal. Did you?
Well, just the obvious of thy will, not mine, be done is that cusp that you're talking about. That was, you could say that he was up till that time expressing soul purpose,
right,
and which was his quite magnificent sphere of influence. But at that moment he realized that it was triadal.
And even more.
In his case, yeah.
Maybe even the triad, whatever that is, has to kind of give way to something even more synthetic. Because he anchored for the first time, the Christ did that sixth initiation filament of divine will. Maybe for the first time, apparently, in such a way. So he really, it wasn't just like, the suffering Jesus, I'd like to get out of here, but I gotta die. It's not that only. It's something higher. A fifth degree initiate basically saying, I've got a good plan, but yours is better. And it's the difference almost between the atmic plane and something more synthetic on the monadic level.
In fact, maybe that whole personal death thing is a blind, and that wasn't his concern at all. We don't know.
Well, not his. Not his concern. Maybe the Christ had gone through that as Krishna. The process forever. Okay. Be done with it. With all the okay. So basically, things are getting more impersonal all the time, and if we tend to, I don't know why this is happening, but if we tend to care a whole lot, first of all, we tend to care about our personality quite a bit, and we're just monitoring it all the time. And he says, never for a moment do you forget yourself, he says. Take your eyes off your personal self. And then, what is going on here? There's the whole question of soul. Why is that? If I have to blame someone, who do I blame?
You could blame me, it's fine. Just speak.
Okay, does that help a little bit? Okay. I'm going to grow accustomed to it and kind of like it, So, all right, so it gets more impersonal all the time. It is still getting that whistle. That's interesting. If I'm here now, there's nothing. Is it good that there's nothing here? Oh, now it's sounding. Okay. Yes, that's good, Francis. Get in there and mess up what you can.
Is there an EQ on his? So he's 2.
But it's more remote all the time.
Gain.
And we see ourselves
That's just going to turn
from a greater distance all the time. And we care less and less about the things we cared a lot about. You know, that's the whole thing.
There's
I
only
mean,
two.
after a while, it's just not yourself at all, is it? You know, because it's hard to give up a self, but when you abstract sufficiently, and your self is, thank you, when your self is centered somewhere else, then you can give up what's no longer a self. You know, it's easy. You just, Master Mori says, well, if you want to die, you should have the same attitude as you would if you cut a hair. That's sort of a first ray abstracted attitude, isn't it? So anyway, we learn the word is pre-sinned. It's a philosophical term that just means to constantly stand back. P-R-E-S-C-I-N-E, something like that. And you're back and back and back and back and back until things become totally inconsequential, even the universe.
There's only one speaker.
Even the universe becomes an infinitesimal. It really teaches humility. It's amazing, you know, no accumulation amounts to a thing. So it's all the same. Just compare anything with absolute infinity, you've got next to nothing. So, you know, it kind of reduces things to where they belong. But that's another subject. Anyway, to be practical about it, the things we cared about become less and less. And we come into a planetary consciousness. Then the fate of all the kingdoms, the fate of the planet as a whole, and we begin to identify with the planet as a whole. See, this constant movement in identification with larger and larger spheres. So that's where we are with the triad. You know, it's you know, the hierarchy is in the triad all the time. They just don't see loss the way we do. We're attached. They're not attached. They found the way free, and what's going on? I'm going to now move towards this microphone.
Michael, would you want to try maybe using the wireless, this handheld, I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Just to see if that works better?
I mean, it's getting a little bit silly, isn't it?
Check, check.
That sounds good.
Okay, let's try this.
Try that. No, the gremlins. I have a problem here.
I haven't mastered this, so it should work well.
That's thank you. I think I'll unplug myself here. Yeah, that's good. All right, so it's a much bigger picture. Now, we moved into the spiritual triad. Let's imagine, just like the masters have, that's their center of consciousness, okay? You know, Master Moria, First Ray Group, at McLean, mostly ashrams, Buddhic level now, right? Ever since 1925, roughly. And then some of the scientific ashrams are still on the abstract mental level, okay? So we have a really big point of view. Now, that big point of view is represented by this column here on the right-hand side. Okay, and that's that big point of view. See, all of us, it's variable. That right-hand column is variable, and the soul ray can change. Doesn't change for everybody, but it could change. And it all starts out monastic, basically 4, 5, 6, or 7, the only soul rays you can possibly have in the beginning. And then as you progress, the third ray may be added as you become intelligent, you know, some millions of years later, really. So we're not going to get that soul ray right away on the third ray. It's going to be 4, 5, 6, or 7. And then we approach the first initiation, that general period. And that's the time from which it is possible to have a second ray soul or a first ray soul. It's very interesting. You can't really have a second or a first ray soul beforehand. You can have astrologically mediated first ray and second ray, but your soul ray is not going to be that. So then a switch can take place, and your polarization on the right-hand column in the triad will be either Buddhic, well, it can be any one of them. If you remain on the third ray, it'll be monastic in the right-hand column. If your soul ray is becomes, let us say, ray 2, it will be a Buddhic polarization in the triad, but even ray 4 and ray 6 on that same line, once you start approaching the first initiation or somewhat beyond it, can then be Buddhic instead of just monastic. See, in other words, there's some kind of unitive thing that starts to happen there. The harmony takes over, the law of love of the system on the sixth ray takes over, and you move towards a more unitive use of the fourth and sixth ray. They might be your soul ray. You might just be with that, but it'll have a Buddhic kind of focus instead of just remaining under the spell of Manas. Does that make sense as you move towards a, yeah, did you want to say? No, you're okay. Now, what about Atmic? Well, again, ray 1 and ray 2 will not be your soul ray unless you're in the period that begins with roughly the first initiation and even goes to the second, because some of those changes in those people, there were 2 changers in DK's group, ISGL and HSD. Oh, both of them had problems, and I don't even know if they really made the change properly, but it was pretty near the second initiation for ISGL, a long time later the change was occurring, but that would mean that since he was going from the sixth ray soul to the second ray soul, he would have a Buddhic focus in the triad and not just monastic. Everybody shares monastic focus in the beginning because we can't go any higher, okay? But then later, millions of years later, we can focus Buddhically. Then what about if you're a seventh ray soul?
Yeah.
What about if you're a fifth ray soul? And usually those 2 rays, I'll never figure out why the fifth ray doesn't move to the third, and sometimes you think it could, but DK says it's invariable, fifth ray to the first, seventh ray to the first. And he, interestingly enough, it was under HSD that was occurring, that he gave that information under the disciple HSD, whose name I remember and whose initials for what they stand I don't remember. But we can find them if we need to. So,
Michael, is there some school of thought that says that you can't start with a seventh ray soul either, that it's just 4, 5, and 6?
No, seventh ray is included.
Oh, it is, okay.
Yeah, definitely. He says, these are your personality rays, you can begin 4, 5, 6, 7. These are your soul rays, you can begin 4, 5, 6, 7. It's around page 570 or 574 in rays and initiation, somewhere right in there.
Okay.
And we can go looking for it if we want to, but that's pretty much what he says.
Okay.
So in the beginning, ray 5 or ray 7 on the soul is going to be monastic. But later, as you're taking the initiations, it can turn into an atmic focus on the soul ray, even though 5 and 7 are retained. You don't necessarily have to switch to the first ray. See, here's the amazing thing. You can take the fourth initiation on rays 4, 5, 6, or 7. See, sometimes he says it's got to be 1, 2, or 3, but we've got to read between the lines when he says that. It doesn't have to be. Otherwise, he wouldn't bother giving 7 different methods of destroying the causal body. Why would he bother? Because it's going to be 1, 2, or 3, right? Okay, so let's suppose we take from ray 5 to ray 1 soul, from ray 7 to ray 1 soul, then we will be focused in atmic, on the atmic level. That'll be our second column. Even though we stay, and even though you might stay a ray 5 soul, and remember Swiss cheese for the causal body falls apart, and ray 7 is the mantric way of destroying the causal body. Even though you stay on 5 and 7, it can still move to an atmic focus. It doesn't have to just be monastic. Now, so, and sometimes I wondered, DK says, I have many types of people in my ashram, including first-rate types. because I have somewhat of the first ray in my spiritual triad. Go figure. You know, he's a master, maybe automatically being a master, you get an atomic dose no matter what. Could be, could be. He says, I have somewhat of the first ray in my spiritual triad. And then DK's pretty tough, you know, he's you know, that nice second ray master tells you to whip yourself into shape and get going. He uses the word whip quite a bit, you know. So that's second ray for you. But he's got other things going, you know. And probably we're not to the point where we kind of want to whip ourselves into shape, but we'll probably have to get there. He was a very zealous master. The joke is he broke his nose on a door because he was so zealous. Someone knows about that. Robert, yeah. Yeah, I mean, he ran right into the door because he was so zealous. You know.
I think it was a beam.
Beam over the door, yeah.
Must be tall.
I mean, what?
I said he must be tall.
He's 6'2", something like that, the story goes. Master Mori is 6'6", and the man is 6'9". Well, you should see the basketball games, it's amazing.
I hear they're undefeated.
They just leap through the air, you know. Yeah. Okay, so now, that is, I don't want to get too recondite here, you know, this is the second column, and changes in the second column affect your soul ray. It's almost like everything's directed from the monad. Really, you know, I mean, even the soul is the monad in projection. The triad is the monad in projection. The monad is the monad, but it's the planetary logos in projection. So we've got to learn how to ascend into the higher areas without breaking the link. It's always there. So what causes this change? And it's probably from the inner center of the being that, okay, it's time now to have a different ray in order to fulfill your function and so forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here. I don't really have the proper thing to show you, but this is good enough in a way. So even though these are planetary logi, these triangles, you can think of them as 7 monadic circles. And you'll find that in Letters on Occult Meditation, where he talks about the 7 circles on the monadic plane, and they each have different types, okay? Can it be, I just asked, that in the beginning, it's also only possible to have monadic subrays on, or secondary sub, on 4, 5, 6, and 7? Could it be? And that later, when it's possible to switch, because the masters are always switching when Sanat Kumara tells them to, or for some kind of purpose, on the subray they can switch around. Not a problem. So I'm calling all of these 7 circles, triangles, I'm calling them sub-influences, even though it's the monadic plane. And I'm saying that that's the first thing you encounter monadically. If you begin to feel around the third initiation or beyond that hey, something else is at work here, that's probably the first thing you're encountering. And remember, basically what I said was that each one of these major or primary monadic sources has 7 possibilities under it. Now the Christ would obviously himself be such a strong 2 on the logoid plane that it would go to 2 on the monadic plane. And you know, he's becoming a ray of love. He's becoming a pure ray of love. He's on the ray path. And that's what he'll be doing for quite a while until he goes eventually to Sirius. That's an amazing thought. It says whatever the Christ does in the meantime, he will eventually return to Sirius. The Buddha was supposed to go to Sirius, but his choice to stay with humanity, what's the word? It deviated, it changed his path. We don't know what it will be right now, but that's not his line particularly. He is, you know, for a third ray monad, he's definitely a third ray monad. It tells you in Cosmic Fire that he and 9 other beings can put in 3 simultaneous independent appearances, and only third ray monads can do that. And second ray monads can put in 2 simultaneous independent appearances. And he didn't say anything about ray 1, but if you continue to follow the trend, the ray 1 monad is where they're at. You know? So they're not. Sure.
Simultaneous in the bodies.
They're like independent beings. That's
Yes.
an incredible idea, you know, that they're like different beings altogether, and yet it's the same being. So
Yes.
there you start to get into Buddhist emanative theory, and you know, it's really quite interesting. But anyway, he did give the Buddhist ray away, and he said basically that the seeds of the earlier solar system ripened in the Buddha. The seeds of the earlier solar system. So, you begin to think that the Buddha was not only present on the moon chain, but was in fact originating, it seems, in the earlier solar system. And where Christ is more representing this particular solar system, earlier solar system, a third ray system. This solar system, a second ray system. Who knows who it'll be next? Some other avatar representing the first ray, and you get the total 3, 2, 1 altogether. So the first monadic ray you meet is going to be, this is a theory, like I say, it remains to be proven correct or incorrect, and probably the best way, maybe Master DK will write further about these things, and he starts writing, or however he's going to do it, in 7 years from now. I keep on thinking that the voice recognition software will be quite advanced by that time, and we'll have Dragon of Wisdom, naturally speaking. Some of you know Dragon, naturally speaking. Okay. I mean, really, you know, no muss, no fuss, but it's probably better to have a secretary, really, you know. I mean, I just can't see DK into computer repair. Anyway. I mean, really, you know, no, I think you find another way to use this time. So, okay. So the key here is that the second part of the spiritual triad is a mixture, right? Remember, the soul is a mixture of solar angelic influence and your own monadic influence. What we call your causal body, your soul consciousness on the higher mental plane is a mixture of 2 streams. Your own monadic, attenuated consciousness, because it's not as vast as it was up there. It's quite, you know, constricted. Plus the solar angel, as much as the solar angel has invested in the egoic lotus, that's your soul consciousness for the moment. But then when the causal body goes, that consciousness really expands, and you don't have the solar angel anymore to tutor you. You basically, the angel of the presence has introduced you to your own monad on the path of return. Plus, you have absorbed a lot of what the solar angel has already taught. So triadal consciousness without a causal body is a lot different than pre-fourth initiation consciousness, okay? And that's when the monad can really start coming in, because he says that the fourth initiation you really have direct contact with the monad. He says somewhere, I just read it. Okay, now, so on the left-hand column here comes a combination, and it doesn't change much. I don't know if it changes at all. First ray monads will have Atmic on the left-hand side. Second ray monads, Buddhic. Third ray monads, monastic. Well, okay, but, the but. Basically, you're looking up here, and this is the major 1, 2, 3. So, you know, but you're going to contact your monadic ray before you're liberated into the logoic plane. You know, 7th initiation, sea of fire, all that kind of thing. That's not right away, and yet it is somehow very influential. So you're contacting a subray first of your monadic ray, and at a certain stage of evolution, it can be any one of the 7. But behind it is the primary ray of the monad. 1, 2, or 3 on the logoid plane. This is a theory, okay, presently a theory. Because it looks like the tree of life, 3 above the 7, and variability reigns on the monadic plane, but not so much on the logoid plane. That's where you're really 1, 2, 3 without switching around on subrays. He told us just on the page before, 176, that the masters choose different rays according to Sanat Kumar's instructions or according to their own need. It's obvious. Look at someone like St. Paul again, like Master Hilarion. He's got ray 5 over here on the monadic plane, but probably ray 1. In other words, that 5, which directs the entire 5th ray, ashram, is really a subray of the 1st ray, primary monad. Okay, and sometimes Leadbeater says some strange things about Master KH and D and Moria changing monadic rays and all that. Maybe he knows something about this. I don't know. So anyway, what causes this? I'd say the basic 1, 2, 3 is all about the 3 major ones. But somehow you contact a monadic subray, and that qualifies the way the 1, 2, or 3 would work. Okay, now, why do I say it's important? Because he tells us that different masters tend to take different paths on the way of higher evolution. Why would that be? Well, a combination of ray 2 and ray 5 might take you to the path of, what's it called? Second path. Magnetic work. He says there's a lot of 1st and 2nd ray masters that take the ray path. Well, they've got to have something else too, don't they? Otherwise they can't embody the 7 different rays. So what I'm trying to say is in the left-hand column, a combination of your 3 above, one of those 3 above, and a subray is both there in the left-hand column. And that stays very stable. That's not the kind of thing that moves around. At least the major ray does not move around. The major or primary ray of the monad, I can get the quotes, might change once every solar system. That's a long time. That's, according to him, 311 trillion years. It's a long time, plus the interval. So that's a stable point. The left-hand column here is a relatively stable point, and there's fluctuation in the right-hand column. But from the experiential angle, when something else is happening up there, Hilarion must have noticed it, right? He's into love, he's into devotion, he's the great representative of the Christ. So what's he doing directing science and the power ray? He must have noticed this at a certain point, and maybe we all will notice that once we are really secure on our soul ray, something else starts to come in. And that's the thing that is very subtle. And that's the thing, we can make all kinds of mistakes and presumptions, and we can think it's this and think it's that. We have to have solid experience with what's coming in and its quality and where does it come from. And so often, the ray of the individual center, which Annie Besant calls the monad, is not the same as the individual ray. The individual ray is the soul ray, and the center of consciousness is the monadic ray. And what I'm saying here is the presumption at the moment that the monad is a dual ray. One of them very stable in terms of the solar system. Another one variable depending on the need. I'm saying that the spiritual triad is a dual ray. One of them fluctuating according to how your soul ray will be changing, and the other one reflecting the monadic impress on the left, quite stable, quite relatively quite stable. I'm saying also, and it's not here, that the soul ray is a dual ray. He gives it to us on page 518 of Dina 2. The Buddha is 2 sub 1, the Christ 2 sub 2, and the meticulous entirety people are 2 sub 3. And then he says, and there's others and more, maybe 7 types, maybe 7 types. So if you're, if you're an artist unifier, you might be 2 sub 4. If you're a researcher into consciousness, you might be 2 sub 5. If you're really in the New World religion, you might be 2 sub 6. And if you're a healer, the 2 healing rays, you might be 2 sub 7.
I have a question.
Go ahead, yeah.
I have a question here. Would we do, if we take the soul ray to be primary and secondary ray, and the secondary is not the sub-ray, how, if we have many sub-rays, we usually do than one, okay? What is the difference in the polarization in the triad between the secondary ray and a sub-ray, let's say, of the soul?
Well, that's a problem because, I get it. We've got to define these 2 terms so they're really
Yes.
acceptable to us.
You need to have the terminology sorted out.
Yeah, because, like I said, I'm giving you my take on this, that a subray can occur on different planes than the original. But that a secondary ray, as I'm defining it, would occur on the same plane, and yet it would be subsidiary to the original. In other words, yes, Peter?
Oh, I remember one quote where he said one of the soul rays would be associated with the egoic group, and the other is more individually generated.
Yeah, there's something about that as well. There is, and that needs to be researched. But the important thing is not just the theory, but the change of experience that we have when we encounter new areas of our higher energy system. See, otherwise we're just talking words. And if we don't have the energy experience, then it's not as meaningful to us. I mean, how he tells us, look, you're going along and all of a sudden a new energy comes in. What might this be? Well, this might be the energy of the soul fighting with the energy of your personality. And through the conflict, you're going to recognize a difference. And thus it may go all the way up to the top. And because your way of higher evolution, that we're all going to be traveling at some point, will depend upon when you individualize, whether it was the previous solar system, moon chain, Lemuria, or Atlantis. It might relate to that, and it might relate to your monadic ray and rays. See, he said, there's a tendency for third ray monads to go to Jupiter or something, or Betelgeuse or something like that. But Jupiter first as kind of a training position. I'm almost sure that before you go to Sirius, which 80 or 85% I think of humanity will do, Venus is the first stop. Because Venus is like Sirius in our solar system. And Venus is a place of training, I think, for work on Sirius. You don't just go straight to Sirius. We change to a sacred planet.
Doesn't it work the other way around too? That Venus is the step-down transformer for Syrian energy. So.
Yeah. Yes, Venus has the Syrian connection, and Jupiter maybe. See, Jupiter is a lot like our sun in many ways. Jupiter maybe is the most representative planet for our particular solar system. But there are 7 solar systems, of which ours is one. And inside our solar system, there's always going to be one planet which is most representative. of one of these other 7 solar systems. Now, if we could ever decide exactly which these solar systems are, Nicholas and I worked on this for quite a while, and maybe, you know, different, almost certainly certain of the stars we're thinking of are probably there. And Peter has his own notion about what those 7 solar systems might be, but maybe we're not entirely sure about all of them. They're usually fairly close to the sun, you know. Vega, if it is part of it, is 26 light years or something, and that would be the max, I guess. Sirius is close, Alpha and Beta Centauri are close, and what's the other one? And Altair is close. Procyon is close, yes, Procyon is close. So, you know, finding what those 7 suns are, or the 6 others besides ours, is like finding the chakras in our local cosmic logos, of which we are a heart center. See, I mean, it gets a little bit involved, but the point is, for us, what do we experience that's different, higher, better, whatever? Otherwise, it's just talk. If somehow in our meditations, some contrasting or intensifying energy comes in, then there we are, we're touching a higher level of our energy system. And then it's relevant, really relevant to us. When can that take place? Well, you know, once the second initiation, you know, I've shown you this quote many times. And, you know, it's that encouraging, daunting, outrageous quote that page 84, bottom of 84, 85, and you basically, it puts a lot of pressure on you, if you don't mind. And he's talking about how things go, and many years elapsed between the birth and the baptism of the initiate Jesus, but the remaining 3 steps were taken in 3 years. Once the second initiation is taken, progress will be rapid. The 3rd and 4th initiations, following probably in the same life, or the succeeding. And remember what he said to ISGL, he said, you could take the second initiation, my brother, therefore you see, we rate you highly. We give you a high rating. So the second initiation is not anything that just say, oh yeah, the second initiation, a lot of people are going to be taking that. And it's a high initiation. And once that's taken, look what might happen in the same life. It almost seems outrageous, you know. I mean, you know, a lot of people say, oh, well, you know, but that's what he said. It's amazing. So, you know, but the question is, do we rise to the opportunity? And we got 7 years left here, and the pressure is going to intensify, and the Christ getting closer and closer. He's going to be overshadowing those who are responsive to him. The opportunity is immense, if we will. That's the question. Because it's easy to go along, you know how it is. It's easy to go along as we've been going along. Or will that extra bit of effort, not more than a bit, will that extra expenditure of effort be characteristic of our approach? So anyway, somehow, second initiation looming, as it loomed for so many people in DK's groups, maybe past, who knows. And now you jump into the stream and the current is carrying you, right? This is entering the stream, right? In the, what's it called? The Golden Lotus, or the, what's the Blavatsky's book there? About the secret of the golden flower or something?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Something like that, right? Okay, enter the stream is carrying you. Of course, while it's carrying you, you have to avoid spiritual ambition. This is the big problem with the second initiation. You know, the spiritual ambition, love of power, all that kind of stuff comes up. So the humility factor is really, really strong, means that Libra had better be strong when you're doing these things, so you keep things in proportion. Yeah. Okay, so now we have the possibility at the second initiation of studying Sanat Kumara, the monad, and identification. Those are the 3 that I seem to remember. And
it's also very connected with the reversal on the wheel. That's that Libra point where your entire perspective shifts. you
Yes.
know, as a result of,
There's a couple of reversals, you know.
yeah.
There's an early reversal where you're really swimming against the grain and you finally get in sight something that is important, but then there's the successful reversal where things are really moving in the direction and you're not held back anymore. Well, basically what you have to do, you want to really reverse the wheel past the temptations in the desert.
Yeah.
That's it.
All astral.
I mean, those temptations are tough, you know. You know, man does not live by bread alone. Don't tempt the Lord thy God, or whatever the other one is. Oh, there's the world, the flesh, and the devil. You know, there's the world, ray 3, temptation, the flesh, ray 2. Ray 1 is the devil, pride. You got to pass all that before the wheel is really rolling forward.
Right.
Yeah. So look, every one of us can decide whether we'll just go along or whether it'll make a difference these next years. And like you said, I could, when he looked at his group, he said, well, I could wish you were younger and more courageous. You know, those things stuck in my mind. I thought to myself, well, we're all too old and cowardly. So I thought, you know, we can't change our age, but we can act as if we can get progress done. And we can be more courageous. That we can do. So that's up to everybody now, basically. So, and if we do that, somehow between the second and third initiation, we will be getting a better idea of what Sanat Kumara is. What is identification? What is the will? You know, what are these factors? It says you can study these things now and must. And doesn't it make sense? Because you're working on the astral plane. What's the number of the astral plane? 2 and 6, right? What's the number of the monadic plane? 2 and 6. Same, isn't it? Depends on where you come from. 2 down, 6 up. Astral plane 2 up, 6 down. So the numerical resonance is there. And that's when whatever the monad is can really start to come in. So I don't consider it irrelevant to talk about the monad. You know, say, why are you talking about that? Well, you know, nobody can get it anyway. I said, I don't believe that. I mean, just stop seeing difference and start seeing sameness. However you manage that, according to your ray. Now, you know, I go through all kinds of complexities to see sameness. But other people might just love their way into it or overpower their way into it, or who knows how they get there. But they can get there. Isness is the thing. If I can just be quiet enough to see isness everywhere and be isness everywhere, I'm already in a slight monadic consciousness. You know what I mean? Can you get sort of what I'm saying? I think we can. Okay, so anyway, that's the story of the 2 columns. The column on the right is correlated with changes in your soul ray, and also where your soul ray is focused at certain points in your evolution. I mean, a ray 4 soul is just going to fight with everybody at an early stage, and later the harmony will come out. In other words, first it's going to be monastic, distinctive, I am I, you are you, let's fight. And the second thing will be harmony. It'll be a more Buddhic focus. It'll still be a ray 4 soul, right? So the second column tells you where in your triad is pulsing, you know. And, you know, when I look at myself, I have kind of a third ray monad, I'm on that sort of monastic Buddhic line right there. See, the Buddhic is second ray soul, you know, along the third ray line, and then the third ray monad. But if I looked at it still from a higher perspective, but I don't know enough yet, but I might find that if I was able to receive the primary, it might be Buddhic. It might be on the logoic plane Buddhic. Then it would be more Buddhic. But I wouldn't have forgotten all the things I learned on Manas, you see. So you don't forget. If you change your esoteric ruler of your chart, you know, let's just say, you're Aquarius. You learn a lot under Uranus, but then it comes time for Jupiter to be the main esoteric ruler. You don't forget everything you learned under Uranus. It's not like you pass it by forever and that's it. It takes a takes it with. And then you go to the moon, or whatever the moon is, in Aquarius, representing, again, Uranus, Neptune, and Vulcan. You take everything from the past with you. It's accumulative, you see. So that's the whole thing about occult progress. It's accumulative, and you don't just leave things behind forever when they're of value. You make a subset of the things experienced. You know what I mean?
In the additive, there's an additive quality. Like,
Additive.
I'm thinking of the quote where he talks about when you move from the cardinal to the fixed cross, that you're then required to occultly combine
Yeah.
the influences of the two,
Okay.
which is an additive thing.
It makes sense. Occult combination. Same thing. You've been spending millions of years on the mutable cross. Have you forgotten how to function as a human being? No. You take it along with you. Master DK is in his triad, and he's talking. I got to find this quote. He says, it's also a funny quote, and I saw it in black and white in front of me, but they came in and messed up my papers. Anyway, so I saw it in black and white, and it said, I am remembering my brother falling in love, the greatest of all glamours. Master DK, quote unquote. You remember?
RBB.
Yeah, it was RBB, who was a Libra. You know, RBB fell in love, left the work, got into trouble, discovered he had made the wrong choice, and came back. So anyway, it's such a, you know, why he doesn't have a culture body. How's he talking about this? Because he brought with him all his memories, you see. So and then when a piece of personal history says, I once fell flat on my face because I told my master I was so devoted to him, and he said I was devoted to myself, and he was right. You know, so he remembers these things. So it is additive. Everything you've done comes along with you. It may not be the focus of your major attention. So anyway, but you've got it there if you want it. And you know, when you make a Maya Varupa and all that, it stays with you, right? Stays with you. So basically, we've got two columns here in the triad, and every one has got two words that apply to them mostly at this time. See, I told you about my monastic Buddhic thing, and how maybe I would be striving to be more Buddhic, you know, if I could contact the primary, what I think is the primary of my monad, primary. But right now it's third ray, very much. So it's monastic, Buddhic. You know, everybody's got two places. But what good does it do if we can't get into the planetary consciousness of the triad? It's just a bunch of words. See what I mean? So we've got to experience this expansion of consciousness which makes us planetary in our concern and our scope. Does that make sense? You know, usually we're pretty preoccupied with a lot of personal things, and then maybe expressing our soul and all that, and that's good and that's wonderful. But what about the planetary plan? How is the, you know, do you love, what's that sequence? Love the plan, love those whom the plan serves, and then, what's the other one? Love the, it's like yourself. Yourself is last. So you love the plan first.
Love the service as yourself.
And
Love the service as yourself.
yes, it's a good idea. It's something like that. It's something like that. But you love those the plan serves, and then or the servers of the plan, and then maybe those who the plan serves. Something like that.
And the plan is the final step?
The plan is the greatest love.
Yeah. Plan, yeah.
Until you realize I am the plan.
Right.
The configuration of energies that I am is the plan.
Yeah.
If I do it right.
This is also part of the sixth ray advancement, is you move from that personal, well, even impersonal, to that transcendent, to the particular group that you're serving selflessly, to the plan itself.
Yeah.
It's the sixth ray
That's
thing.
right. Because after all, the plan is a great thought form in the God of the planet, you know. And you are an idea in that thought form, see, or whatever Sanat Kumara is thinking, and we are part of that thought. So it's always the bigger and deeper, the better. See, we can say, oh, but I love X and I love Y and I love Z. But when you find out that these things are part of something still bigger that you are, it only makes sense to expand with it, you know. So that's the spiritual triad, and it has two rays, yeah.
Would it be possible to look at the two paragraphs about this and just define the terms there found?
This here?
Yeah.
And notice how his spelling, notice his spelling. Under the regime of the ego, capital E, the ray upon which the ego can be found holds sway. So what is the ego? You know, sometimes the ego with a real capital E there is the triad, and you can even call the monad the ego from a certain perspective. The ray is simply a direct reflection of the monad and is dependent upon that aspect of the spiritual triad which for man is at any particular time the line of least resistance. So the variability is going to occur on the right-hand column. But by that we must understand that sometimes the ray will have for its center of force the atmic aspect, sometimes the Buddhic, and at other times the monastic aspect. Though the triad is threefold, yet its egoic outposts, if one may so express it, will be either definitely atmic or predominantly Buddhic or monastic. There's a lot here to ponder, okay? I pondered a long time and it just drives you crazy. Here again, I would draw attention to the fact that this triple demonstration can be seen under the three forms, making in all a ninefold choice of rays with the ego. Yeah, ninefold choice of rays. And I guess what's important here, I mean, and earlier on page 176, he tells why you have possibly 7 subrays, because the Kumara says do this, or because you choose to express along varying lines. You know, I hesitate to get too much into this. This is a deep, deep ponder. I guess the main thing that I'm trying to say is, inside the triad, 2 things are happening. One is the direct reflection of the monad, and the other determines the soul ray, and may be a direct reflection of the sub-ray of your major monad. Now, those are all technicalities, you know, and what is really true, but somehow everything starts from the top. In occultism, it all starts from the top. Even in the old days, when you're individualizing without a solar angel, it's a stimulation from the top. An animal man responds, evokes, and an egoic lotus is formed. But it starts from the inside of you, and that's the monad. The monad is always the inside of you. Really, really the deep internal being nature which lasts forever. That's the monad. Doesn't mean the vehicle of the monad will last forever, because it won't. The temples are all destroyed. The universe is destroyed infinitudinously. But what is the essence of that ring past not? That is never destroyed, never came to birth, never the spirit was born, never shall it die. So we have to learn how to identify with the immortal factor, which is qualified by different types of matter, but which is not them per se. So that's the Vedantic way. You know, that's the Buddha. It's behind the Buddha, and certainly Shankara teaches that really strongly, somehow. Yeah. So what do you think, Nicholas?
Yes, well, I think we need to define, we talk about like the dual ray of the monad, primary and secondary, and we talk about the dual ray of the soul,
Yes, and
primary and secondary.
and dual ray of the triad.
And now we also talk about the dual ray of the triad.
Right.
So we need to
Yeah.
clarify
Yeah.
how those interact or not, in order
Yeah.
to see
Well-
how they connect with these ninefold egoic outputs.
Well, but part of the dual ray is the ninefold egoic outpost, right? It's all coming from above, really, isn't it? Because your soul ray is directly dependent upon the ray of your monastic permanent atom. He says, page 169, Esoteric Psychology 1, that according to the ray of your monastic permanent atom, so will be your soul ray.
Is that the primary or secondary?
This is the primary soul ray.
That is the primary.
I mean, he doesn't distinguish because it's anti-basant and so forth. He's basically saying this is the, because basically it's the way the monastic permanent atom is colored in the second column. Now we could get into it further and say, is every permanent atom in the triad, does every permanent atom have a dual coloration? One from the monad and one from the subrays of the monad. Go ahead.
Well, as Nicholas is bringing up this, which I agree, my own understanding that we have a primary secondary monad and primary secondary soul. We also have 7 subrays of the primary monad on the monadic plane.
Yeah.
Now, my understanding now here, or trying to figure it out, how all these rays, what they are doing in the triad, you see? Because if we take the primary ray of the monad, that is either atmic, Buddhic, or monastic. That is a primary division of the triad. Now, if we take the secondary ray of the monad, what is it doing in that triad? I have no clear idea about that. Okay?
Well, I think
And what are the 7 subrays on the monadic plane which are reflecting the will of the monad, and we cannot translate them from the perspective of consciousness or quality as we normally do, but from the will aspect, okay? Which we can only do as we're going to approach that monad, okay? Now, how these 7 subrays, what are they doing? You see, I see here synthesizing process must be approached in this, to that the subrays and the secondary rays of both soul and the monad are working together in that triad. And this is my major problem in understanding how this can be done. I don't know what is your opinion about that.
yeah, it has to be.
Yeah.
It has to be, and we've attempted this before on various points, but basically the ray of your soul, which is so influential in each incarnation, is determined from above, basically. And we know how important the soul ray is, and we know it can change or it need not change. And I think it's correlated with changes in the second column and not so much in the first.
Yeah.
The first is much more stable. It lasts a long, long time. And there's also some places in the Treatise on White Magic where he talks about the ray of the monad lasting for an eon. What's an eon? It depends. You want to call it a manvantara, you want to call it a mahamanvantara. An eon is a flexible term. So this is all Greek philosophy. There is same and there is different. There is same and there is other. So the same factor relates, it's never totally the same, but the same factor relates to the left-hand column and to the primary rays of the monad. And the other or different has to do with the flexibility of changing soul rays, which we can do maybe twice, or maybe once, or maybe not at all. You know what I mean by that? In other words, you may take your 4th initiation on one of the rays of attribute. You may do it. Or you may change, like ray 4 and ray 6 can both go to ray 3, Ray 4 and Ray 6 can both go to Ray 2. It's kind of interesting. Maybe according to the nature of the monad will be the decision about whether Ray 4 soul and Ray 6 soul go to a third Ray soul, or whether they go to a second Ray soul. See, but I have a feeling it's all controlled from above, because above is what we are. And we are invested in different parts of the descending emanative stream. But it's all controlled from the part of the divine purpose which, as a monad, we represent. See, our purpose factor is monadic, and that holds the whole pattern. And so different things that work out below it depend on the part of the purpose we are representing as a monad.
I was just thinking about the seventh ray, which was the second ray.
There was one strange, here's why I think this can happen.
Exception to the rule.
Here's why I think this can happen. The rays of attribute tend to be combinations of the rays of aspect. Now, different people say different things, but ray 4 I see as a combination of 2 and 1, destructive or harmonious. Ray 5, a combination of 1 and 3. Ray 6, a combination of 3 and, what do I say? No.
2 and 3.
2 and, no. Ray 6 derives from 2 and 3. And Ray 7, equal proportions of all. Therefore, the possibility of switching to the third ray is easy. And Master R took a bunch of his initiates of the second degree onto the third ray with him when he became the Mahachohan. The normal thing is to switch to Ray 1. But then why not, if it's equal proportions, why not Ray 2? And that's just a subtle little hint. So usually if you're a first ray soul, you got a second ray monad, but not always, because there was somebody in DK's group who didn't last long. This person was too nervous or too high-strung or something, and this person had a seventh ray soul and a first ray monad, something like that. It's just too intense, that's all. So there's always exceptions to the rule. Yeah.
In keeping with that as above, so below, could it be pure conjecture that since the monastic permanent atom determines the ray of the soul, that the atmic permanent atom is determined by the monadic subray, that monadic plane subray?
As long as it's the same, with the monastic permanent atom, because right here is the place where it tells you
all three are the same.
All three the
So
same.
what about this idea of the duality of rays in the spiritual triad, though?
Well, and apparently what determines the soul ray is in the right-hand column and not in the left-hand column.
Yeah.
Because in the left-hand column, it's monadically derived and much more stable. Now, how it's done and when you meet, look, if you're an essentially, you got rays 1, 2, and 3 in your monadic rays, when do you meet them? Are they so pervading that you meet them right away?
No.
You just don't know. I mean, I don't know. But here are 7 monadic rays on the monadic plane. It kind of stands to reason that you would meet one of those first. But who knows? There can be a very, very strong impulse. So I'd like to look at them in a combination. And I like to think, and I may be wrong, but I like to think that, let's see, in fact, I like to think.
Well, while you're thinking, I have an analogy here. If we enter the fifth kingdom through the manas, we enter the monad through the manas, I think.
It just depends on when the monad becomes available. To me,
The question is which, the primary or the secondary monad?
either one to me, because the soul is reflection of something monadic, you know, because from the monad straight to the jewel in the lotus, so it's the reflection in part of the monad. Now, when are you qualified to meet the monad? See, that's the question. And we enter, like you say, through Manas, but when we start coming to the first and second initiation, as we've discussed before, the monadic ray enters the soul, and the brain is not aware of it. So around the time of the first initiation, some kind of connection there with some aspect of the monad
Yes.
is occurring. But it may no longer be the monastic period. That's the question. In other words, when you come to the first initiation, let's say, your causal body is moving up to the next plane. So it's not strictly the monastic period anymore. So look, here's the question. People say, well, we shouldn't even be doing a class like this because no one can meet their monad or meet themselves as a monad. Now, I think that's not true, you know, because it's in a way the most obvious thing, at least to a master who sees us as we are. So do we have any experience in meeting our monad? This is the question. And when we do meet this other quality, how does it manifest? What does it feel like? How is it changing the life? That's what we're going to meditate on now. Okay? Okay. I knew there was someplace I wanted to go, and where did I want to go? Oh, yes, it was the birth and the baptism, and look, all of this stuff is real. Now, every atom.
Weekly.
Okay, look. Here it is. Don't ever let some creative person fool you. Here it is. The second outpouring, this is so interesting, the second outpouring, that each of the divine centers of consciousness, i.e. monads, put forth a thread of being, what a thought, into an atom of the highest subplanes of the atmic, Buddhic, and monastic planes. That's where your permanent atoms for the triad are coming in. They're just an atom on the highest subplane of atmic, Buddhi, or manas, and your center of consciousness, says Mrs. Besant, that's your monad, and it puts a thread of being. The highest subplanes of the atmic, Buddhic, and monastic planes, atoms destined to be the nuclei of future bodies, each on its respective plane, the three forming the upper triad, so often referred to, and we don't have those bodies yet. Our Buddhic body is not organized. We don't need a monastic body. We will have it because we've got a causal body.
Right.
And we don't have an atmic body yet. We've just got the center of the future atmic body. Okay. Now, in fact, now every atom of those atoms is under the influence of one or other of the rays, and the atmic, Buddhic, and upper and monastic atoms referred to all belong to the same ray. And there it is. Every permanent atom in the triad, they all belong to the same ray. But this is not necessarily the same ray as that to which the overshadowing center of consciousness belongs.
Which is the monad.
Namely, yes. So he's not here dealing with duality in the triad. He's just basically saying you've got a triad and you've got a monad, and they're usually different, or often different. That's what he's saying. In fact, in the majority of cases, the ray of the center of consciousness and the ray of the triad are different. And that ray of the triad is what's determining your soul ray, basically. One modifies the other. The former being the primary, called by Mrs. Besant the monadic ray, the other being the secondary or individual ray, since the monastic atom is the nucleus of the future causal body in which the individual passes from life to life, and they're all the same.
All the same.
See, so that's your triadal origin of your soul, basically.
It's like the three dropping the one, you know, that concept. You
Yeah,
know,
the three.
The germ that
Yeah,
drops
yeah,
from
yeah,
the
right,
three.
from the secret doctrine.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. So look, I know it seems like high stuff, but on the other hand, what if you contact a different energy and it does something different to you, and you feel, wait a second, now I've got more going on here than I had before. Where does it come from? It comes from the upper parts of our energy system. And if we meditate on that, we might be able to touch something that we didn't know was there before. And that would be an expansion of consciousness, wouldn't it? See, so it's not totally out of range. Not really. I mean, I'll tell you a piece of personal history. Okay, you know, so I'm studying theosophy, and, you know, I'm studying, what am I studying? A lot of Alice Bailey. And I'm not thinking in these terms particularly. Then something happens in the year 1991 around, and I run into Shankaras like an old friend. And I say, whoa, what's going on here? And this was the beginning of you know, this piece of personal history here, of me writing infinitization of selfhood. Obviously not on the second ray line, right? Not necessarily on the first ray line either, some kind of third ray line. If you know, read that book, and I can count the readers on one hand. Someone said, this book will keep doors open. Okay. If it doesn't fall off the shelf first and cause irreparable damage. But I really got interested in something else. I mean, I knew I had to keep reading Bailey and doing my work and all the rest of it, but I really got interested in something else. And I said, wow, how does this all work? How does being work? You know, how does infinity work in all of this? And I just got on that line for 27 years now. There have been ups and downs, you know. Sometimes I say, oh, bad boy, bad boy. So I get back to Bailey really strong. But you know, I just kind of wander off into that third ray, which is being impulsed by what? By what? Maybe if I looked at it at that time, I'd be able to see something in the chart, or some chart, which would show me why I became very interested in that, and then say, I'm not going to listen to anybody. I'm going to do this myself. You know, because everybody's... Chiron, you think? Could be. I don't know. I have to look. But I said, nobody's going to tell me how to do this, because there's nobody that can tell me how to do this. I have to work this out myself entirely. And I tried to do so. Then I went, after writing that book, which was 20 years ago, roughly, I really got back into Bailey and said, we got a lot of work to do, and we do, and I do it. And now again, I'm on it. This book called Seeds of the Infinite. You know, it's like 10,000 seed thoughts. And I really mean it. I have hit 10,000. I'm a bit over. But I'm working on that and trying to explain all of these different perspectives. Maybe it's third ray again, you know, how this works. And trying to come out with this book, which will give people a totally different angle on being and how to get there. Well, of course, you don't get there. You are that, you know. I mean, but how to actually open the door so we realize that this is being. Okay, so it's on the third ray again. So where'd that come? Because that's not just if I have a third ray mind. Okay, but it's not coming from a third ray mind. That's just instrumental in the process. It's coming from something else. I'm touching a different quality, which is changing my life. Now, maybe the same could be the case in your case. Who knows what you might touch? Of course, I know that the second ray soul had better infused the personality. Otherwise, you get off on some kind of crazy trip, and you know, you don't follow things correctly, okay? So I know that, and I work on it and all that. But if another stream of energy starts knocking at the door, what is that? And that's where these rays of the triad and all that start coming in, your higher ray chart. It's quite fine to think of your higher ray chart as long as you don't abandon the duty of making sure you are a soul-infused personality. We have a dual curriculum. Master DK has handed us a dual curriculum. Do the soul, do the triad monad. Simultaneously. It's a very big job. It's like making up for the Moonchain massacre, you know. It's like making, you know what I mean? It's like say, oh, we did this badly. Now do them both together. And that's what I'm trying to say is available to all of us if we don't stretch it too far and stick with our duty. You know what I mean? Stick with our duty, but maybe something, you know. A lot of us may be third ray monads, at least initially, because we come from the moon chain, or maybe even earlier, where the majority is 75% ray 3 monads, 12.5% ray 1, 12.5% ray 2. And inside of that 75%, maybe 4, 5, 6, and 7 as well in some proportion, who knows. This is known in the inner karmic places and in the Manus department, I suppose, distributing the races and all that. It's known inside. We're just scratching at the surface here. So it makes sense to at least have an inkling. So few first ray monads, 5 billion in the solar system, or maybe it's planetary, I don't know, I haven't figured that out yet. 35 billion second ray monads, the majority. 20 billion leftovers, third ray monads, the stragglers, the failures, whatever. And they come into this system from the third ray, either on the moon chain or earlier. So it's nice to know where you came from, right? I mean, you know, or at least to have some kind of idea of what you're doing. Usually, in the 3 great departments, the first ray monads are oriented towards the Masonic organism. The second ray monads are oriented towards the church organism, and the third ray monads are oriented towards the banded esoteric organisms. And of course they can be very materialistic third ray monads, but if you have a mixture in there with the second ray, it's a lot less materialistic, and you may be along the philosophical line, you see. Okay, now where were we? It's, oh my goodness. So let's have a little meditation on something. And then tonight, we will actually start dealing with the qualities of the 3 primary monadic rays. Now, you know, and in my book on the monad, I deal with this rather exhaustively, at least giving everyone a seed for thought about how you might combine these things, you see. Because
I have a quick question, because if I don't ask it now, I can lose it.
you may lose it, yeah.
When you're talking about the rays, the connection between the monadic ray and the sub-rays, because the initiating expression is that of the sound and the note, is it possible that the note of the monad and manas and that in between are on the same chord?
Well, there's going to be a chord.
So that the sub-ray would
Yeah.
be all part of that same chord.
And different octaves, and it's going to be a musical phenomenon, it's going to be a color phenomenon, it's going to be a vibratory phenomenon, yes.
That's how you would relate what it would be the same ray, the same note around a different octave.
Yes, and of course, once we get into that, he says the 4th ray approach to healing through sound and color and so forth, that's going to be one of the first things to come in. So maybe we'll be able to discriminate better if we use the 4th and 5th ray together to discover the kind of thing you're talking about. Well, we are all a chord. And Sanat Kumara is composing a symphony, and we are all chords in chord progressions within that symphony. And the Solar Logos is composing a solar sonata. I mean, he differentiates between the symphony and the sonata, and basically the different planets are all going to provide different parts of the sequence of the phrases, and it's all a big musical thing that's happening, and we have to make very sure we know what we're doing when we try to analyze that way. But it is, for those who are musically inclined, it will be revealed along that line.
You're saying we're all in accord.
We're all in accord. We are. We not only are we all in accord, we all are accord. And our life is consisting of phrases and movements, first, second, and third movement, finales, developmental sections, and the whole thing as in music. It's all musical. Pythagoras knew this. And in those days, music and mathematics were the key. That's how you get in. And it will probably be the same in the future. Music will be very important in a fourth ray age. It's coming very soon, the new Renaissance. And the first part of the new Renaissance will be the written word. That's what he says, the poetry or whatever, how we express through the written word. Then there'll be the question of sound and music, and there'll be also the visual part of it. And he says it will make the cathedrals of the past look like children's building blocks. Okay, so we're on the cusp of that kind of incredible possibility, and we just have to apply our occult mind to be as sharp about these things as we can be, so we don't make a bunch of blundering mistakes and we can be really useful. Okay, so let's have a little meditation, and in a moment I'll determine what the subject is. And then tonight we'll get into, Francis will lead off with the first ray monad, and Tuya has things to say about the second. I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm just going to make something up. Okay. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm shot. Oh. Maybe if I get between here, between Robert's head, and maybe if you two guys could, Robert, if you and Helen could move down this way, that would help. Thank you. Because later when we look at it, to the wall. Okay, so we have done some triadal work, and we imagine that we are using a soul ray to project into an impersonal realm which has planetary implications. And there's a response from the Father's home. The prodigal son returns through projection. And it's the ray along the right-hand side of the triadal column that is basically the ray of projection, but the answer may come in a different way. The answer may come from a monadic source. And I have something to say about that, about the kinds of things the monad will reveal, what it opens the door to, so whatever kind of monad it may be. So let's just say that in some realm, even beyond the planet, or at least going to the very higher reaches of it, there's something that knows about identification. there's something that doesn't just get caught in the world of quality. There's some synthetic factor that puts many things together and somehow knows the beingness behind all qualitatively different things. So just imagine for a moment that you look at other people, other places, other things, whatever crosses your eye or comes into your ear, and that all of those differences are, real enough, but they pale before the raw fact of being. Because whatever you see, whatever you register, is before it is anything special. It is before you start to describe what it is. It's the fact that it is that is of primary importance, and what it is comes as a secondary factor. In that respect, all things are equal in isness. Doesn't make any difference what you register. The first thing is that it is. Then come all the distinctions and differentiations. And in this higher world, or inner world of realization, there is a very great ability to identify as the isness of anything. That's called identification. It's like really beyond the mind, which chops everything up and then puts it back together and all that. It's very necessary, but this business of identifying as the other, not with the other. If you identify with the other, you're still separate from the other. But if you identify as the other, apparent other, so in the divine Pymander, it talks about, it's said to be very old, but maybe written by certain Neoplatonists, maybe. There's a lot of talk about the only one thing. The only one thing. Now, our minds are filled with distinctions. This is separate from that, this is different from that, and we lose sight of the only one thing, the one and only substantiality. Doesn't mean matter, substance. It means there's something underneath. And I use the word to get to it, infuception. Infuception. That's how you get to that only one thing. Which certainly doesn't mean you ignore variety and Maya and all that. You deal with it. But you're not confined to otherness and difference. You can enter the world of sameness. Which is immortal and without beginning and without end, and negates fear, which drives you back into difference and distinction. Now, there's a part of us that begins to reveal this substance. For Spinoza, God is substance. Being is substance. Sameness is substance. It's always there, and we share it identically with everything and everybody, and it is indivisible in reality. And it is revealed through the art of identification. Now, we're all going to get into the state of being the only one thing. We're all going to get there, and we're already there, in fact. It's just a question of whether the myopic consciousness registers this. But how do you get there? And I propose there are different ways to get there, according to the quality of your monadic race. So is there anything in you that really longs, gravitates towards universality, which is an ever-expanding participation in the greater and greater dimensions of cosmos. Do you feel anything knocking at your door? You know, maybe now you've developed some of your soul qualities. Maybe love wisdom is a more habitual factor in your life. Maybe the assertion of the will is more common. Maybe, you know, like some of those financiers like Gates and, what's his name, Warren
Buffett.
I forget his last name.
Buffett.
Yeah. You know, they see what money can do in terms of bettering humanity, philanthropy. You know, maybe you're becoming familiar with that kind of approach. But maybe there's something knocking at your door, which is either the same or different. Because you can, of course, have the same monadic ray as soul ray. It's quite possible. In the case of someone like Roberto Assagioli, it kind of looks like he does. And when you get to someone like the Christ, it's pretty obvious. Ray 2 is going all the way up there. Maybe even Master KH. But is there any other quality? Do you have any universal longings in you? Do you have any desire or aspiration to expand beyond your usual fixation of consciousness? And maybe that would be an encounter with the not only a higher level of will, but a higher level of appreciated universality. You know, in the Aquarian age, the sign of universality, it's very possible that, I mean, look, right now we're all omnipresent with the news. We're everywhere in the world. Everywhere in the world. It's amazing, we're everywhere. But is it one love in which we participate in? Is it one will in which we participate? We certainly can be everywhere. Already it's happening. A move towards universality. Larger and larger ring pass not. So, what's knocking at the door? It doesn't mean you can give up your soul in fusion. That's the project. Got to do it. That's the only way to achieve the fourth degree and expand the lotus until it can be dispensed with. But at the same time, the curriculum of universality is being offered via the Antakarana. Now that means going in a different direction than worrying about, am I good, am I bad, what are my qualities, am I expressing myself, blah, blah, blah. That's all within the dense physical body of the solar and planetary logos. That's not yet the real thing. It's not yet the cosmic ethers, the great, great movements and inclusions, universal states of perception. They're left out. So now, that's the question. How do you get there? And what we're going to do a little later this evening is we're going to discuss some of the qualities or ways of manifesting of maybe the first three monadic rays. You know, you could probably do all seven, but I don't think we really have time for it. We basically are going to look at ray 1 and 2 tonight, and ray 3 in the morning. But up there's a way of getting to being. Earlier, 7 methods of destroying the causal body were given. Now, 7 methods of realizing universality and being are being offered. And what is your way, if you care about these things? I mean, there's a lot of ways, and they correlate with the rays. You can power your way there, you can love your way there, you can, well, he calls it the manipulator. I guess you can think your way there, the acute energy of divine mental perception. That's how the third ray might use it. You can beautify and harmonize your way there. You can investigate all possibilities on the fifth ray. You can, with total commitment, passion, and devotion and fire, you can immolate everything that stands in the way, or you can use the way of the magician. You can get there, because you already are there, but you know, it's a question, in Maya, do we realize it? So maybe that will help us if we have these longings for universality, for the big participation, for the ending of this confinement. If we have the will to freedom, because there's only freedom in being, maybe we can find what's knocking at the door without giving up the job of soul infusion. That's the constant reminder. Otherwise, what I'm talking about ends up being a great escape. So we'll look at that tonight, what monads do, and what different kinds of monads tend to do. And see if there's anything in our lower self that is beginning to respond to the higher levels of our energy system. Maybe not, but maybe yes. Okay, we'll just close this reflection with an Om, assuming that there is in all of us something that wants to expand, and something that wants to deepen, and something that wants to identify as the monad can identify. We'll make those assumptions. Now, if that's not true of us, then we can't study these things. Okay. I'm not sure what time I said. I maybe imagine you're close to exhaustion yet. Just trying to see, because I think obviously this kind of thing should be discussed, but we don't have to discuss it yet. First of all, we'll talk about tonight what monads do. Then we'll talk about the ways they do it. And then maybe we can have a discussion or a meditation which helps to identify the method you're going to use to universalize your consciousness, if that's what you want to do, or at least to expand it, right? At least that much, right?